Do you trust your local poll workers? Not the people down the road or from the far off. The people that you see in the spring and the fall, do you trust your local poll workers? Joshua, listening to Bull Falls Radio in Wausau on WXCO says, quote, I had to go talk to the clerk about something and they went above and beyond checking if I was registered and got me an absentee ballot in case I needed it. Absolutely trust them, unquote. We've taken about, what do you think, Zommers? 25, 30 between texts and phone calls?
Around there, yeah.
Every single person trusts their local poll workers. Here to talk about voting and about how it applies to Wisconsin, very honored to have two members of the Democracy Defense Project. Former Wisconsin Attorney General J.B. Van Hollen, who served as the state AG from 2007 until 2015, a Republican, and Mandela Barnes, former Democratic Lieutenant Governor under Tony Evers during his first term. Gentlemen, thank you so very much for taking time to join us from your respective places around Wisconsin on this beautiful Thursday edition. I want to start off by saying I have the unique position as a 30-year Republican who left the party in 2011 of having voted for and supported both JB and having voted for and supported Mandela. So bipartisanship is broken out already. But gentlemen, thanks so much for taking the time to be here.
It's great to be on. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us.
I appreciate you guys. Let's just start really quickly. For people who, have voted for both of you or either one of you over the years, kind of wondering, I think people always wonder what happens to people after they're no longer on the ballot. First of all, Attorney General Van Hollen, what have you been up to these days?
Well, very good things happen when you're no longer on the ballot. I think Mandela and I agree on that. I've actually been kicking back. I moved back up to northern Wisconsin, where I'm from, and I've mostly retired. I'm doing more philanthropic work like this, and enjoying life a little bit. Looking forward to and enjoying the fact that I don't have members of either side of the political aisle complaining about me.
And former Lieutenant Governor Barnes, yourself, since you left office, what have you been up to?
I may be more deep in it now, to be honest with you. But this is certainly an important project. I'm honored to have a chance to work with the former Attorney General because, quite frankly, our democracy is in jeopardy. There are too many people who are calling into question election results. And as you mentioned, local poll workers and asking the question if people trust them. And I'm certainly grateful that you shared the example of the person who had an incredible experience with a poll worker who went above and beyond. And honestly, that is the norm. That is more often than not how things go. But their integrity has been called into question by, nefarious actors. And we as former statewide elected officials are talking to folks in our own respective parties and the broader audience of people who aren't really dialed into the partisan politics, but unfortunately catch wind of disinformation, and we're doing everything we can to promote the integrity of elections and talk about how secure our elections are run here in the state of Wisconsin.
Lieutenant Governor, talk to us a little bit about, because this group, Democracy Defense Project, it's yourself and the former Attorney General, of course, and we're happy to have you guys here. In full disclosure, my former boss, Republican U.S. Representative Scott Klug, is also a part of this, and former Wisconsin Democratic State Party Chair Mike Tate. How did this come about, and how the heck do you get the political lambs to lay down the political lions over this cause?
Yeah, so
go ahead, Mandela.
Okay. This came about because of the very immediate need for us to protect democracy and to also, protect the integrity of our election and our poll workers who show up for work, whether it's every day in clerk's offices or on election day as volunteers to make sure that our elections are run smoothly. And this is an effort that's taking place in a number of states across the country. Wisconsin, given the political importance of it all, was certainly an ideal place to have it. But the way that you get this sort of bipartisan collaboration is, one, you have people who aren't in office anymore, but two, people who care about the root of the elections that we have run in ourselves, whether we've won or whether we've lost. And that root is, again, the cause of democracy. And if elections are called into question, that throws everything into chaos. I lost my race by 1 point, could have easily taken a different route and said, oh no, well, something unfair certainly must have happened for me to lose by such a narrow margin. And, you have to face reality of the voters. And there's so much hubris right now where people feel as if there's no way that they could ever be unsuccessful in an election because everybody must be in love with them for them to have gotten into a campaign in the first place, which is the first indicator that person shouldn't be in office in the first place.
Right. Former Attorney General Van Hollen, I left the party in 2011 over what I considered, seen in the caucus where they were talking about so-called voter ID bills. In my opinion, it was voter suppression. That was my personal choice. I was in Ripon, Wisconsin last week when former Congresswoman Liz Cheney was there, of course, with the vice president to endorse her. Do you still consider yourself a Republican?
Very much so. Matter of fact, I've always considered myself a fairly extreme, if you will, conservative Republican. And I think people would realize that if I ever served in or ran for a policy making type of position, but I've always been in law enforcement. And I've always thought that the rule of law needed to prevail. And in law enforcement, my job was to interpret and enforce the law, do it with objectivity. And so, because of that, and because of being in groups like this, there are some who have misinterpreted me as not being conservative enough. But it's me doing the job of the office that I ran for.
I think that's really interesting. I give you both credit, and I guess because where I came from politically, I would give you a little bit more credit, Attorney General Van Hollen, just because I think it's really hard to still be a Republican and do what you're doing. And what you just said there, when you say you consider yourself a very conservative Republican, I mean, maybe at one time, but when I was voting for you, it was what you said. You were tough on crime. You put bad people away. You wanted people prosecuted for crimes when they were convicted for it, and to keep Wisconsinites safe. I don't think that's extreme. I think that's the job of an attorney general. But when you say extreme conservatism today, to your point, I think a lot of people hear that and say, in Liz Cheney's, I'm paraphrasing, that means complete loyalty to Donald Trump and Trumpism, regardless of what the election results are.
Well, and I think that's one of the problems with the labels that people get. Me being conservative has to do with believing in limited government, believing in local control, believing in the rule of law. Some of these things, it doesn't mean, despite the fact I'm pro-life, it doesn't mean being pro-life. It doesn't mean being pro-gun, even though I am. It's a set of principles and beliefs, not a loyalty to a given candidate, such as President Trump, or a loyalty necessarily to the position of certain party leaders. So, sometimes you're not going to agree with people who are doing things for purely partisan reasons that aren't necessarily the right way to do things. So you can have conservative principles, but not necessarily being one of those people who believe that they have to follow the leaders of their given party all the time.
And Lieutenant Governor, I didn't mean that as a slight, by the way, saying that JB got more credit. I guess it just from being a former Republican, I just think in today's world, it's tougher for people that still say, hey, however, I'm not putting words in your mouth, JB, but I mean, I'm still the same person. Maybe some people in the party changed. But I think for you, Lieutenant Governor, I voted for you because you were, again, in my opinion, a person who wanted to uphold the rule of law, like fair elections. And I think you got painted as something that, the whole thing, about soft on crime and all this crap. I thought that was very unfair politically, but, elections, I guess, are never fair. But to both of your credits, Lieutenant Governor, despite the outcome of you losing by a fraction of the vote, you never cried wolf or foul, and you maintained democracy.
Oh, for sure. And I definitely didn't take that as a slight when you said that the Attorney General gets more credit there, because there is honestly a much bigger risk for Republicans, it feels like, to talk about democracy. People have been ostracized. You brought up Liz Cheney. I mean, she was primaried out of her congressional seat because there was only so much she could take. And so I join you in applauding the former Attorney General in stepping up and saying enough is enough, because the law should be applied equally. It shouldn't come down to what your political leanings are. It should come down to the bare facts, and that's what this is about.
So talk a little bit what you're doing with the Democracy Defense Project, appearing on shows like this. Are you having forums? I know you did a Wis Politics forum, first Lieutenant Governor and then Attorney General.
Yeah, so doing interviews like this, just getting getting this into as many conversations as possible. It could be radio interviews, TV interviews, it could be forums, it could be smaller things. I think I'm actually I think we're trying to get a visit to a senior facility on the books, because they were interested in this conversation about democracy. We're talking about people who, were, if we're talking about the senior facility in particular, we're talking about folks who didn't always experience the hyper-partisan nature of our politics. And these are folks who've had Republican friends that they talked about everything with, including politics, and were able to have a civil discussion, and folks who would like to see us get back closer to that point in time.
Former Lieutenant or Attorney General Van Hollen, you were the state's top cop. In your own words, you're a conservative. You don't mess around. You're a law and order guy. In all of your time in office in Wisconsin, did you ever see extreme cases of voter fraud that would have changed the outcome of an election?
It's not really what we're here to talk about. I think I did, which is why I was such a strong supporter of voter ID, because I saw a number of cases where I think voter ID would have corrected the problem, or most cases where it should have. Whether you believed in it or not, now we have voter ID, and there's a lot less basis for complaint anymore, which helps our cause, both myself and Lieutenant Governor, in saying we have free and fair elections with great integrity. And there are very few flaws, I believe, in the system anymore. One place where there really isn't even an accused flaw is people's votes being counted if they cast them. And that's really what our coalition is about talking about, is encouraging people to vote, because there's very little in the way of allegations that my vote was cast, but it didn't count. Most of the allegations, whether true or not, are somebody voted who wasn't entitled to. And with all of the talk of voter fraud, stolen elections, and it comes from both sides of the aisle, it's certainly the most vocal and most recent by President Trump, but with all of those allegations, we don't want people to say, oh, geez, my vote's not going to count anyway, I'm staying home. Because if people have a lot of ways to cast their ballots, and if they cast their ballot, it's almost assuredly going to be counted. Our election workers do a phenomenal job. They take a bipartisan approach to it. And we want to make sure that people aren't dissuaded from voting.
In this story, I'm looking at Wisconsin Examiner, you were asked whether or not you thought there was going to be a controversy after this election. You said, quote, no, I really believe Trump's going to win. And I believe that based on that, he's not going to be screaming about voter fraud. And he's the voice of voter fraud out, and he's not the voice of voter fraud out there. I join in our mutual friend, Brian Shimmy, the chair of the Republican Party, saying, I wish the former president would talk about policy. Unfortunately, Attorney General Van Hollen, Trump has not done that. I mean, he's talked about, he continues to perpetuate the lie about the 2020 election. I mean, you agree that he lost the 2020 election, right?
I do agree that he lost the 2020 election, if for no other reason than because that's what the vote tallies said. Much like Lieutenant Governor Barnes says, maybe he could have come out after his close election and shown that he should have won. But under the system we have in place, he did not win, and he honored that. So if you want to complain about the system and you want to try to change the system and things along those lines, by all means, work on that. Get elected, hire coalitions, do whatever you can to try to change the way the system is. But under the system that we have, he lost that election.
I want to come back. We're up against the clock here. I want to come back and spend the next portion of this with former Attorney General Van Hollen and former Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes, talking about how elections work in Wisconsin and why we can trust that the outcome in a couple of 3 weeks here will be safe and secure. Welcome back to the Todd Ball Show on the Civic Media Radio Network. It is 9 now before the hour of 1 o'clock. Coming up in hour 2, Kelly Call, one of the producers of Just Had Been Outside, the story of the 1982 Milwaukee Brewers. And then at 1:30, Amy Roseborough from Wisconsin Historical Society, archaeologist, talking about unearthing indigenous canoes in Dane County. Quick poll, former Attorney General Van Hollen, Lieutenant Governor Barnes, have you seen Just Had Been Outside?
I have not. I have
movie?
not, but I saw the movie Major League. It's fantastic. I'm a huge fan of the Brewers. I'm a huge fan of Euchre.
Go see this movie. It's fantastic. It's a great documentary. All right, there's my plug.
Okay.
There's
I'll
my
check it out.
And I get no money for it. I've seen it a couple, 3 times. It's a great film. More importantly, we're here to talk to the former Attorney General and former Lieutenant Governor about poll workers, about democracy, and why voters in Wisconsin can trust their elections. Start with you, former Lieutenant Governor Barnes. Talk to us just at the 30,000-foot level. What is the process that Wisconsinites have to go through to vote, and the poll workers do? Just tell people why they can trust our elections.
So I'll say that poll workers in Wisconsin do have to go through training. You don't just show up and walk in and say, I'm going to be a poll worker. Although you could and should, because you will then get the training to do the job effectively. And so there's the inspector training also that takes place, and that happens every 2 years. And this training is provided by the municipal clerks. And the municipal clerks part is important because, trust me, administering an election is difficult and stressful enough as it is. The last thing they want are people who are not able to effectively do the job. So being able to go in there, get the training that is required, it's not a cumbersome process, but in terms of the legalities, in terms of the oath or the what you have to agree to be a poll worker. I mean, there are extensive measures in place to ensure that integrity is maintained in these elections. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, I've known people who are poll workers in my family. My mom was one of them for many years. And correct me if I'm wrong, but nobody's going in a dark room and counting ballots by themselves. I mean, there is.
The room is very bright because
right?
most poll workers I know have to pull out the readers, and they pull out the readers, and they require enough light to see those tallies at the end of the receipt.
But there's other people around. It's a very open process. That there's checklists. So it's.
And the chief inspectors are also. The chief inspectors are also certified by the Wisconsin Elections Commission. And these are folks who, again, do not want that stress, don't want to lose their job. So they're going to, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but there are very tight ships that are run.
Yes, 100%.
I've been there at the end of a night. I've had friends who were running for office and we were trying to collect numbers, and it is a tight ship.
It is. Former Attorney General Van Hollen, talk a little bit, speaking of polls, different kind of poll. I know you guys have looked at this. We asked this question today. Do you, the listener, trust your local poll workers? But you guys have done your own research on this.
Yeah, our group went into the field with a poll on a lot of different election-related issues to see what the general public opinion is in Wisconsin. And the bottom line is what you've heard today with your callers is what we heard in the polling. People trust in their local polling officials, but they have a mistrust in the ones that aren't their local ones. I trust in my polling officials, but I don't trust in my neighbors. So the ones they're more familiar with, the localities, the people involved, they trust. But because of probably allegations out there of problems with voting, they figured the problem must exist somewhere, and so it must exist somewhere else. The reality is, to piggyback a little bit on what Lieutenant Governor just said, we have bipartisan poll workers. What people have to be aware of is it's not like a Democrat district has just Democrats in there and a Republican district has just Republicans in there. It's not the case. They're there from both parties, and everybody's there to be able to observe, to be able to participate in the process, which gives great credibility to the polling places. And I think, as you mentioned about one caller pointed out, most municipal clerks will be more than happy to walk you through the process and show you how it's done to give you more faith in the procedure.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Attorney General Van Hollen, because you're right. Each location, they have to find a certain percentage of people that identify as Republicans and a certain percentage that identify as Democrats. So it's not one party running any polling place.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand these things or aren't aware of these things. For instance, in our poll, a lot of people said they would be more comfortable with the election process if A, B, or C were done. Well, we know that A, B, and C are already being done. So I think there are a lot of protections out there that people just aren't aware of. And if they were aware of everything, they'd have a lot more confidence.
I want to give each of you about 30 seconds to close as two former, and I will still say state leaders because of what you're doing in this. First of all, Republican J.B. Van Hollen, former Attorney General, what would you say to your friends and neighbors across Wisconsin about the integrity of voting in Wisconsin?
It is secure. Vote. The bottom line is what you may think about allegations from either side about voter integrity. There are very few, if any, allegations saying that if you cast a valid vote, that it's not going to count. So if you vote, whether it be absentee, whether it's early voting, whether you show up at the poll on election day, it's almost absolutely certain that your vote is going to count. The only way your candidate is going to get, let's say, screwed out of winning an election is if you don't show up and vote for that candidate.
Great point. Democrat Mandela Barnes, former Lieutenant Governor of Wisconsin, what would you say to your friends and neighbors and supporters about voting integrity?
I'll say that there are so many checkpoints in place, whether it's by the Wisconsin Election Commission or poll workers at each individual polling location. All of our ballots are backed up by paper documentation, and we also have strict measures in place to ensure that people are who they say they are. Whether I agree with those provisions or not, they are in place, and those are the provisions that should cast away any doubt that people have in the process. So, our elections are stellar, and we have great people doing the work making that happen.
J.B. Mandela Barnes, thank you so very much. A listener says thank you.
Or J.B. Van Hollen.
What did I say?
Something else. I don't know
what
what
did I
it
say?
was.
Sorry. I apologize. What did I say?
I think Mandel.
Oh, Lord.
J.B.
I'm sorry.
Mandel and
That's
Mandela
what
Barnes.
happens when an old man tries to read things and talk and do 5 things at once. I apologize.
You made me sound like an onion, J.B. Vandelia.
I'll correct it on the other side. I'm sorry. Now, I wanted to get this in. It was a compliment. It says, this conversation today is encouraging me to possibly become a poll worker, and I don't need readers yet. So I thought that was the best compliment. That was the best compliment you could both get, that you actually, a conversation that inspired someone to be a poll worker.
Yeah, no, seriously.
So thank you both. I apologize. I messed up the names. I'll correct it when we come back.
No worries.
All right. Best to both of you. Thank you.
Take care, guys.
Sounds good. Thank you.